Welcome to AP European History with Dr. Brovkin. Today, our session is about one of the greatest painters, artists of Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci. It is very hard to say in a few minutes something meaningful about such an important artist, but I'll try. So let's first about his personality and his background. Leonardo was born in around 1450s in a family of a notary, and he was an illegitimate son. So all his life he struggled with this, but this was no problem at that time. In Italy, there were many illegitimate children. Many princes had and nobility had illegitimate children, which were then legalized, but his father never legalized him, and he stayed in this capacity as he had good relations with his father. His father helped me a great deal to get commissions and things. Nevertheless, he never made him a legal son, because that would require him to be a notary instead. Another interesting thing, he was gay. All his life he was never married, he never had children, he was not particularly interested in women, and even though he did paint a few portraits of women, there's no nudes, unlike other artists, Botticelli and others of his age. So he was also, it was fairly accepted in the society. Not that everybody knew that he was gay, but everybody knew he was not married, and this was accepted for somehow in his life. As a person, what really distinguishes Leonardo more than anything else is insatiable quest for knowledge. He wanted to know just about everything, and when you look at his interests, they do make some sense in that he wanted to know things that helped him to paint. So in order to understand his painting, one would have to see how his interest developed. So he wanted to see how the muscles work, and he had dozens and dozens and actually hundreds of drawings about muscles, and he wrote many works on anatomy, so much so that now scientists say that if he had published it, he would have been ahead of his time in this field for 100 years, in this field for 400 years, etc. So in order to understand human body and the way to represent it on canvas, he studied anatomy. He also was absolutely an expert in optics. In order to be able to paint the eye, he had to understand how it works. Of course, he had to know how the perspective works and the diminution in perspective of buildings. He's totally an expert. He began to study mountains and rocks and how they are represented and what landscape means in terms of its perspective and in terms of its color and in terms of how it appears. He was absolutely fascinated with water and air, and he studied the flows of water and how water changes and what color it comes and why is it transparent and why is it blue and why is the sky blue and why is it gray. He was interested in all kinds of things that he had to find an answer, and he was writing in his notes that, as I said, now we feel, a lot of scholars feel that this is a contribution of knowledge in its own right. Now, he's interested in how to draw, and that makes his drawing unique. We'll come to that later. He's interested in how objects fly, and this is why he has drawings of helicopters and coins of flying machines. He was interested in how to swim, and he has drawings of something that could be conceived today as a submarine. So in many ways, he was a unique personality that combined the quest for knowledge and scientific endeavor that helped him to draw and make paintings that are now considered to be masterpieces. But they are masterpieces because in his paintings, and there were not that many, he actually combined his knowledge of the eye, of the optics, of the perspective, of the color, of the movement that made them unique. Now, in a most simplistic way, what makes Leonardo's paintings different from others, including others of Renaissance painters, is that he is the first to try to link motion and emotion. He tried to show the senses, the emotional state of a human being through his paintings by actually knowing how the optics works and how the muscles works. So let me just focus on two of the most important paintings, and there are many, many others. But the two most important ones is the Last Supper, which is done in Milan in one of the churches that he was commissioned to do. The Last Supper is a very famous painting. You have Jesus and his apostles, and the story is everybody knows this. This is the moment in the painting where Jesus announces to the apostles that one of them is going to betray him. Now that is the dramatic moment, and this is what Leonardo captures in this painting. If you look at the painting attentively, you see all kinds of emotions that people express through motion, through gestures of their bodies, of their faces, of their fingers, etc. So, for example, you could see anger in St. Peter's face. You see denial. You see surprise. You see serenity. Jesus' face, you see knowledge of his fate, you see anger of others, and they are grouped in threes with their gestures that kind of summarizes their overall response to what have just been announced, that one of them is going to betray them. So this is why this is typical Leonardo, and this is why this is a masterpiece, because of this connection between emotional state of a human being captured in a moment, a fleeting moment. The second one that is absolutely world famous, of course, is Mona Lisa or Gioconda. Now, the reason there's two names is because this is a portrait of a Florentine woman, a wife of Mr. Giocondo, who was a merchant and a friend or a familiar a friend of his father's as a notary, and he got this commission through his father to paint the painting of a wife of a client and a friend of his father. So Lisa Gioconda, or My Lisa, Mona Lisa, or Gioconda. So why is this painting considered to be the absolutely supreme of Leonardo and of Renaissance? Very simple, for the same thing. It captures the fleeting moment. It captures a kind of a incredible smile of Mona Lisa, which is done because he studied for years. He studied what actual muscles of the lips produce. The Mona Lisa's secret is that he studied the way the muscles of the lips express what kind of emotion and what kind of a state of mind. He spent months and months, maybe years, studying the muscles of all kinds, and especially of lips. And there are his notes where he describes these findings as to which kind of lips, which kind of muscles of the face correspond to which expression. So what is remarkable about Mona Lisa's smile is exactly that. It's kind of fleeting emotion that one doesn't know. She's kind of smiling, but she also secretive. She has something to tell, but she is not telling it. That is what he captured. That is unparalleled, and there's no other smile like that. The second thing that he was absolutely a master of, also connected to science, is optics. Mona Lisa's eyes are shifting. In other words, they follow you. If you walk through from the left to the right, they will follow you. She would be looking at you. And he was absolutely a master of doing that. He invented that technique. There were other painters who followed him, but nevertheless, that is what makes her look and her eyes absolutely distinctive and unique. Leonardo liked his painting so much, his Mona Lisa, that he couldn't part with it. He never delivered it to Mr. Giocondo. He kept with him, even when later in his life he went to France to live in the palace provided by Francois I of France. He took a few most favorite paintings with him, and among those three was actually Mona Lisa. Now, A few things about his life in general and his biography. We have just talked a little bit about his art and his paintings and the most unique features of those. But his life was pretty much divided into maybe four major periods. His youth is in Florence under Lorenzo de' Medici, which is the golden years of Renaissance. This is where he knew Botticelli and Michelangelo and many other artists. As a matter of fact, his relationship with Michelangelo was very stormy and didn't like each other, and he accused Michelangelo of painting like a sculptor would, and that means that he didn't like it. He thought that painting is unique and shouldn't be confused with sculpture. His second period was, and the longest one, about 20 years, was in Milan, where he wrote a letter to the Duke of Milan, Sforza, who was a kind of a dictator, and described himself mostly not even as an artist, but as an engineer. And he could do all kinds of fortifications, and he could do kinds of waterworks, and he described himself that yes, he could paint like any other, no worse than anybody else that he knew of, but also he presented himself as an engineer, and for a long time he had this reputation that he is actually an engineer that could help in military constructions. It took him a long time to actually rise in his reputation and ranking in Milan, and in the end he did provide all kinds of engineering works that are mostly forgotten because they were parades and all kinds of fireworks and all kinds of tricks during celebrations that he, as an engineer, was a master of. Then in 1499, Milan was taken over by the French. He had to leave. He comes back for a few years back to Florence, but Florence was also in turmoil right after the revolution of Savonarola, and then he comes back and his republic is reestablished, and he is still kind of uncomfortable in Florence. Somehow he never quite made it to be the favorite of the Lorenzo Medici or the bureaucracy of Florence. They do have him do a couple of commissions and he abandons them. He just doesn't feel like doing it, and he goes to Rome. And this is a Roman period, and a good one, because he did have a protector, one of the Medicis, who will later be a pope, Leo X. But in Rome he's also competing with Michelangelo, and he's traveling around. This is where he meets Machiavelli, and finally he finds his patrons that turn out to be the longest one. First, the French King Louis, and then and then the next king, Francois I. And it is the relationship with Francois I that actually played an enormous role in his life and in where Mona Lisa is, because Francois invited him to come to France. He gave him money, he gave him freedom to do whatever he wanted. He gave him a permanent stipend, and he settled in the magnificent Chateau Chambord, and this is where he continued his fantasies. He didn't have to paint, there was no commissions anymore, and he did his drawings and he did his flying machines, and he continued his incredible and endless quest for knowledge and for understanding the mechanics of things. Finally, a few words about Leonardo as a Renaissance man. What we mean by Renaissance man is not only that it's a rebirth of Greek and Roman architecture and tastes and stuff like that. Mostly it is that Leonardo combines in one personality just about the essence of Renaissance, which is quest of knowledge and art. It's the marriage of art and science. And by implication, he is not particularly interested in religion. It's a very delicate matter. It's not that he's not a Christian. He is. And when he dies, he does has a call for a priest, for communion, and all that stuff. But religion is not what inspires him. Science does. He is totally fascinated with science, and he seeks for answers like a Renaissance man, not in religion. Not like Martin Luther would in religion. No, he seeks in experience, in experiment, and in science. And in that sense, he exemplifies a bigger picture, which is a relationship of Renaissance men like Leonardo with religion, which is that religion is there, they wouldn't deny it. They paint Madonnas and they do commissions and they have good relations with their patrons. A lot of them are clerics in church and pope, but it is just not relevant as much as it was in the Middle Ages and as it would be in the Age of Reformation. Renaissance is kind of not particularly interested in religion and much more interested in rediscovery of knowledge, and especially of the Greco-Roman knowledge that they would push to the upper limits, and that would make them unique. Thank you. That'll be it. And don't forget to tell all your friends to subscribe to AP European History with Dr. Brovkin, and Russian History with Dr. Brovkin, and Middle Eastern History with Dr. Brovkin.